Joe Biden and the Democrats have stumbled out of the gate by failing to live up to a promise made to the American public. And in the case of Joe Biden, it's a personal pledge, but failure to prioritize and move quickly on $2,000 direct payments in COVID relief for Americans, to send out $2,000 checks and to do it ASAP. So this was the single issue that determined the outcome of the Georgia Senate races, the Georgia Senate runoffs, which handed control of the Senate back to the Democrats. Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, newly elected Democrats in the Senate of Georgia, both very vocal proponents of the $2,000 payments. This was something that obviously the Democrats had been pushing aggressively for in the lead up to Georgia. It was a single issue. It basically tipped the scales overwhelmingly uh, uh, in terms of the balance of power in the Senate. It was what everybody was talking about. Donald Trump, as you all recall, was vocally in favor as the Republican president, and that led to 10 U.S. Senate Republicans to come out in favor of, from Deb Fischer and Marco Rubio to Josh Hawley, who was a supporter of before Donald Trump came out. Well, actually, no, he was supporting 1,200 before Trump came out. But my point is totally non-controversial, both within the Senate. You have enough votes, 10 Republicans having gone on record. You've got the Democrats in the Senate and House. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer were very aggressively and loudly advocating in favor. 80% issue, 80% of the American public is in favor of $2,000 checks. This is responsible for the Democrats regaining control. Joe Biden has come out in favor of. Of course, he waited until Donald Trump took the lead on that, but ever since then, you have the Republican president coming out in favor of. That obviously put immense pressure on Joe Biden, and so he came out advocating for $2,000. Kamala Harris, who prior to being appointed vice president, was the co-lead sponsor on a $2,000 a month bill, which ever since being vice president, she's since shied from publicly endorsing or even mentioning, frankly. But nonetheless, um, all the dynamics, all the dominoes are there for this to have a go ahead. All Joe Biden has to do in order to fulfill his personal pledge of being the uniter in chief, of uniting a divided country and healing wounds. Obviously, the country's still reeling from Donald Trump's last days in office, the assault in the Capitol, etc. All Joe Biden has to do to live up to his personal pledge, his dream of uniting the country and being the healer in chief, and all this corny rhetoric, which is still important, is literally, he's already got really high approval ratings. All you got to do to keep that momentum going and be a really popular president is arguably just distribute vaccine, obviously 100 million doses of vaccine, but you also got to get the $2,000 checks out in a timely fashion. Get that money out the door immediately, which is literally something that Biden had pledged the day before the Georgia Senate runoffs at a rally in support of the two Democrats. He was saying, it's this simple. If you vote for the Democrats, Democrats take back control of the Senate, you're going to get $2,000 checks out the door ASAP. If it's the Republicans, you won't. So now here we are. And the Democrats are now talking about likely March for not only $2,000 checks, but 2,000. Actually, it's not $2,000 checks at all. It's $1,400 checks. So they rounded down. So that's the first failing. They already have basically walked back $2,000 checks and embraced $1,400 checks by rounding up from the difference from the $600 checks that were recently passed as part of the last COVID bill, which included that. So instead of a whole $2,000, which is the rhetoric that was used even after the $600 passed, they're saying, no, it's going to be $1,400 and it's going to be part of a large bill which is going to probably not get passed until sometime in early March. Now, those are the reports that it's going to be. The Democrats are signaling that they don't think that they can get a direct payment out as part of a broader package before March. And Biden recently issued a list of executive orders that on day one he passed, and those included a bunch of other non-COVID relief-related economic bread and butter issues that enjoy public support. There was some stuff pertaining to COVID, like expansion of SNAP benefits, but for the most part, they included these immigration priorities of the Democrats, including defending Dreamers program for undocumented young Americans, changing Trump's arrest priorities for immigrants and customs enforcement, counting non-citizens in the U.S. Census again, ending the Muslim travel ban. Now, for the record, I actually agree with all these policies. I think these are all important priorities for the Democrats to pursue. But you got to understand, these are divisive issues, right? Half the country, the Republicans, and especially the Republican caucus in the Senate and House, does not agree with these issues. In fact, you're already seeing House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican, come out and basically lamenting that, oh, Joe Biden is sort of already dividing us by aggressively pursuing these immigration issues. And part of that is, I'm sure, him just being, an opposition party. But part of that is also, acknowledging there's a very real missed opportunity, and Biden's approval rating entering office, I think it's between 75% right now. And, it reminds me of when Obama took office, in 2009. He enjoyed, I think he was also in the 60s, mid to low 60% in terms of approval, or 65% approval rating, something like that. And rather than make good on fulfilling, these sort of economic promises that were made, Obama sort of went the similar road of taking these less popular, less consensus economic issues and economic policies, like, for example, Medicare for all, which at the time, to be fair, was not that popular, but at the very least, a public option, which is something that he did, that he was vocal about on the campaign trail, failing to prioritize that and sort of pivoting in favor of these sort of culture war issues, a la immigration. And, obviously, Obama's presidency could not be by any legitimate measure a success. I mean, he lost under his 8 years, over 1,000 seats at the state and local level, in addition to in the federal level. Obviously, Democrats lost the House and the Senate. More importantly, Donald Trump became president. So obviously, a strong backlash effect to Obama. And then you saw Donald Trump make the same mistake again. He did the Muslim ban, and he did all this like really controversial, less popular stuff, less consensus stuff, more divisive stuff, rather than sort of follow through on his, reversing the effects of free trade deals that decimated the manufacturing economy, or, living up to the promises of a vast infrastructure spending bill, which would have obviously created jobs across the country, good paying union jobs. Rather than follow through on any of that, he used the sort of vague rhetoric of universal health care, and ending the wars. He didn't do any of that stuff. He just sort of prioritized all this sort of less less popular stuff that, again, Donald Trump is now a one-term president. And obviously there are many other reasons for that, obviously. But, I don't want to get too sidetracked with Donald Trump. So, Joe Biden, sort of doomed, to repeat history, by not learning the lessons from, his predecessors, which is surprising because, he served under Obama as vice president, and also because his personal vision is to sort of unite the country. And, how do you do that other than rhetorically? How do you do that if not pursuing these really popular, overwhelmingly consensus economic policies like $2,000 checks? And, I'm already seeing reports that Georgia feels betrayed. The voters of Georgia that turned out to elect John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock and give Democrats control of the Senate back. You're already seeing reports of activists on the ground who knocked on doors for Joe Biden, as well as voters who turned out for him. They say that yes, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue's corruption in terms of profiting off of COVID by acting on private information, classified information at COVID intelligence hearings and to dump stock and etc. That was a factor, but also it was the $2,000 checks. It was how aggressive John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock were in promising that those checks would go out the door immediately. Those Georgia voters already feel betrayed, and there's really no reason for it. I mean, because if you look at the situation, Joe Biden can use reconciliation. The Democrats can use reconciliation. They don't need they don't need Republicans on this. Even if they work with Republicans on a standalone bill, I've already said something like 10 Republican senators have gone on the record in support. So they could conceivably get this through as a standalone bill. You obviously make that less likely to pass when you tie it to this other to this broader COVID budget bill, which is going to include all these other more controversial things that the Republicans are going to be less likely to get behind. And, that's exactly the approach that the Democrats are taking. And that approach sort of dooms you from the start, because you got to understand the Democrats are not likely to pass to nuke the legislative filibuster. So you need 60 votes in the Senate in order to have a filibuster-proof supermajority, which is basically makes it harder for the opposition party, the Republicans, to be able to kill the bill on the Senate floor by protesting. All right, so it would be one thing if you were going to nuke the filibuster, if you were going to go down the road of a larger COVID relief bill and you nuke the filibuster, then that's one thing. But Joe Manchin, who's one of these conservative Democrats from the state of West Virginia, in the lead up to Georgia, was very outspoken, doing the rounds on cable news, talking about how he very much opposed, how he thought it was too divisive to go down the road of the supermajority. So at the very least, there's a process known as reconciliation, which allows for the Democrats to, absent a filibuster, to bypass the opposition party by only requiring a simple majority, 51 votes instead of 60. And so, but if Joe Manchin, who signaled opposition to $2,000, is not on board, you can still get Republicans to defect. Again, Josh Hawley, you can get Marco Rubio, who's in favor of this. And Marco Rubio has also expressed support for other Biden economic policies that were, again, sort of staples of the Trump administration's rhetoric with regards to manufacturing, right? Expanding American manufacturing. Marco Rubio signaling support for a Biden executive order to go ahead and invoke the Defense Production Act in order to speed up American production on PPE and COVID related stuff that obviously would make us less dependent on China, helpful. So you've already got, again, some bipartisan support. But why you wouldn't go the road of why you wouldn't simply just go down the reconciliation road? And interestingly enough, you know, there's this other thing that's going on right now where, because the Senate is technically tied, it's deadlocked 50-50, and then Kamala Harris, as the vice president under the rules, gets to serve as the tiebreaker. So technically the Democrats are the majority, but in practice, as it actually is, it's 50-50. So this is something that's rarely happened in American history. Last time it happened was 20 years ago. And so you have to have these like power sharing agreements between the two parties, in which control of the committees gets decided. And so Democrats are going to control the Senate budget committee, for example, and the Republicans are going to control like two or three other committees. And as part of those committees, Mitch McConnell is trying to get Chuck Schumer, whom he's negotiating with as Senate Majority Leader. He's trying to get Chuck Schumer to agree not to nuke the filibuster, at the same time that he's saying, well, I'm letting you know right now, if you guys are going to go down this immigration road, you guys are not going to have votes amongst the Republicans. But in order for us to agree to do anything, to come to any agreements on even the power sharing agreement, so you can go ahead and so that the Republicans can work with Biden on cabinet appointments, etc. We want you first to promise us that you're not gonna nuke the filibuster. So we want that promise in advance in order for in order for us to even concede any ground on this power sharing agreement, which is obviously just a ridiculous power play. And then you have Chuck Schumer basically willing, well, so far he's holding his ground, but it would be ridiculous for Chuck Schumer not to leverage. Wait a second, if you don't want us to nuke the filibuster, then you should work with us on this power sharing agreement, and then you should, as an example, work with us on this on $2,000. Or on this COVID relief bill. So you're sort of seeing, the Democrats not making the most of their leverage in either this power sharing agreement or via the power of this reconciliation, this reconciliation authority that they have, and then basically you're seeing, them squander an opportunity by basically committing to this bipartisan thing, which again, if it's not on consensus issues, like the $2,000 checks, which are right there. I mean, that's all you have to do to be considered an extremely popular president, is get the $2,000 checks. And now you're saying $1,400 checks. So you're doing this technocratic, half-assed reneging on promises. So you're already lowering expectations. You're already disappointing voters. But to delay until March, because of, we're not going to go through reconciliation, and Mitch McConnell is threatening, and Mitch McConnell is being unfair and unreasonable in this power sharing thing. And so, knowing all of that and knowing everything that's at stake with the pandemic and 30 million on permanent unemployment now, the COVID the disease is actually getting worse. It's actually proliferating more now that the UK strain, that's up to 50% more contagious, has arrived here. So cases are expected to surge. We're expected to hit 500,000 deaths sometime next month. We just hit 400,000 deaths 5 weeks after we hit 300,000. So basically, we're seeing the disease going exponential, with some reports now indicating that it's actually more deadly now, this new variant of COVID, even more deadly than the last strain that we had. So as the economic problems are going to worsen, for Joe Biden to basically, who's already sitting at great approval ratings, to not learn from history and to basically fail his own personal promises in order to appease bad faith Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who's going to be obstructionist anyhow, or claim to be obstructionist anyhow. Even on the economic issues, McConnell not likely to agree. But on the issues where you do have support from the Republican caucus, where you have the Josh Hawley, Marco Rubio, Deb Fisher on $2,000 checks, to instead opt an 80% public support, to instead delay, so that no, we're going to be bipartisan. We're going to unite the country, as you're doing this other stuff via executive order that's less popular, that's going to be more divisive. All of that all together I just think it amounts to a huge wasted opportunity for Joe Biden and the Democrats out of the gate. There's no excuse for it. You've already got voters in Georgia feeling betrayed. And, I just don't understand why you wouldn't opt for using your power, using your leverage. Again, Joe Manchin, you can pressure Joe Manchin, but to not at the very least, it's use budget reconciliation, which again is the legislative power on budget legislation, on budget bills, that allows you to bypass the Senate. To not at the very least use that, which you can use for $2,000 and even get Republican defections to even overcome a conservative Democrat in Joe Manchin. To not explore that, as you have Mitch McConnell already indicating during these power sharing agreements that, listen, we're gonna be obstructionist, just as they were previously under Obama when Biden was vice president. To not take all that information and respond accordingly, I think it's total letdown and probably and probably a bad omen of things to come from the Biden administration. And it's so horrible because the bar is so low. I mean, Donald Trump has set the bar so low. Donald Trump's approval rating is in the tank. There are some polls that have him now at 20%, 30% because of the way he went out the door with stoking the insurrection. And, the country really wants, really wants, and needs Joe Biden to be the uniter that he was vowing to be. But for Joe Biden to sort of lean into the less populist stuff and sort of abandon the single issue promises on the single issue that got him and the Democrats elected in Georgia. Really discouraging, really disheartening.